early days, we were sitting in the Ethereum Foundation office. So Gnosis didn't have an own office. And Stefan was like, just go to the room next door. There you have Christian. He is the inventor of Solidity. Just ask him.
Do you think crypto goes fully private and we have to kind of do an about face with all of these governments and lobbyists?
I would hope that regulations acknowledge this and say, it's not that we have to see everything. We just need a way that you can prove that something, in case something malicious happens, that you were not part of it.
What upcoming areas, what features are you most excited about?
I think there is still a big part that is not only about making money quick DeFi style, but also a lot of values in crypto about openness, collaboration, working together, sharing cool tech. And I think in these chaotic times, this is what motivates me the most about crypto.
Thanks so much for joining, Richard. Thanks for joining the Web3 Security Podcast. Great to have you here. For the audience, for people who don't know, we have Richard Meissner on today. He's the co-founder of Safe. If you're not familiar with Safe, if you've heard of a multi-sig, you've probably heard of Safe. When people think of multi-sigs, they generally think of Safe. And I saw some recent stats that Safe smart accounts have transacted over $1 trillion, and there's over 60 billion in TVL secured by Safe on EVM. So yeah, it's a huge part of the ecosystem. I know on the website it says Vitalik Buterin uses Safe for his funds. So yeah, great to have you on, and thanks for joining today. And would love to start by kind of getting into your background, if that works for you.
Definitely. Thanks for having me, Jack. Happy to be here. I'm happy to also share some of the updates around Safe and where we are and what is our vision going forward. Lots of stuff happens. So yeah.
Awesome. Sounds great. Well, yeah, take us back to the very beginning. Obviously, you're the co-founder of Safe. You're a super important person in the ecosystem. Where did you grow up? What was your background? How did you first get into computers?
Actually, where I grew up is I'm one of the few people also in the team that actually are from the place where most of our dev team works on, which is in Berlin. So actually quite the home place for me, and has actually quite an importance for how I got into also the crypto ecosystem. But how did I get into computers? Actually, I was or still am a vivid computer gamer. So I like to play games a lot. And at some point in, fifth grade or something like, or sixth grade, I started doing JavaScript web page mini games for myself. And this somehow then evolved into doing more programming, being interested in writing like little robots when I was in high school. And so this basically got me then into doing more of the real programming, not just the web JavaScript stuff. And yeah, and this ultimately got me into also studying computer science. The official name is IT Systems Engineering, where I actually had the first touch points not with crypto, but with the founders of Gnosis, because we actually, Martin, Stefan, and I were on the same university. They were 1 year ahead of myself. Then I also met one of the co-founders from Safe, Tobias. We actually were friends in university. We're together there. But I only got into crypto quite a bit later, which was after another startup. I went to another startup together with Tobias, which was around something like TikTok, just a couple years earlier, which is called Dubsmash. Yeah. And at some point, they moved to New York, and I have family, and I did not want to move to New York with my family. And that's basically when Stefan was like, "Oh, we need mobile devs because we want to bring a multi-signature wallet, the old Gnosis multi-sig, to mobile." And that's basically how I got then to Gnosis and into crypto. And that was 2017.
Got it. Okay, so what's kind of your decision criteria around some of these roles you've taken? Because early TikTok, moving into early crypto, was it the technological components that interested you? Was it the business?
Actually, not the business. I don't think it's very much technology and team. Also with, in the early TikTok, like 2015, on-device video rendering was not the normal and easy thing to do, especially on Android. That was a pain. So that interested me in the dub smash part. And crypto, actually, it was new tech. I knew Stefan. And so I was like, I was happy to join. I think I can remember how he tried to give me the early business idea of Gnosis. And the business upside was like, we don't have shares, how you normally have in startups, but we have tokens. And I was like, cool. I don't know what these tokens are, but okay, Stefan, I know you. I'm going to go. I'm going to join. But yeah, this was, I think, in hindsight, I think I didn't grasp the full potential of the business and the all around. It was more the tech and the team. And even there, I have to say, I think the real love to crypto came after I joined. I couldn't think, or I couldn't foresee the love that I will get for the crypto ecosystem.
Got it. Okay. So it was a lot of the team, some of the early technological challenges, but you had some people you trusted from university who were getting into this, and you decided, even if these token things sound like a scam, sure, we'll take that instead of equity.
Yes.
Nice. Do you have any, I think that was 2017 that you joined. Yeah. Do you have any crazy stories? I mean, the infra back then, like anything that you can remember from the early days of Ethereum or early days of building Gnosis that come to mind?
One of the stories that I can think of was I joined the ecosystem, I joined crypto, and what I realized is that there's a lot of groundwork to do. And then there was one point where I realized just how amazing and open this ecosystem is when I was sitting there with one of our colleagues, and we were building Solidity ABI and coding libraries in Kotlin, because we needed this for the mobile app. And we had some questions. It was not clear. Documentation on Solidity was not great. And so we asked Stefan, hey, do you know anyone? And it's at this early days, we were sitting in the Ethereum Foundation office. So Gnosis didn't have an own office. And Stefan was like, just go to the room next door. There you have Christian. He is the inventor of Solidity. Just ask him. So it was we just walked over and talked to him directly. And it was, because it's just a small group, it was so direct and it was such an open ecosystem. It felt amazing. And I feel like this experience to be able to just basically grab one of the core developers and sit in person down with them to explain you something, why they did something and how it works. It's amazing. I don't think that the ecosystem grew a lot. You don't have it as much anymore, but it's still the charm of this openness of the crypto ecosystem that I very much love. And this is one of the reasons why I am in the crypto ecosystem. It's this openness and that you can build on top of everything and look into everything.
Yeah. I have some points I want to ask you about related to that later on. But I guess in terms of following the story, what was the point at which you joined Gnosis? What was the original idea that you guys were working on back then?
So I joined shortly after the ICO from Gnosis. And at this point, it was very much around prediction markets. Right? When Gnosis joined, they pushed out the first version of prediction markets. They got their DLT license. I think it's DLT. So all of this was going on. And as part of this, basically the very simplified idea that later they translated into this slogan of create, trade, hold, is this that you say, we create tokens with prediction markets, because there you have outcome tokens, which basically say what you believe in, which outcome will be happening. Then obviously to make prediction markets work is really where you have to trade these tokens. That's also why they had a lot of these market mechanisms early on developed, and also slow trade, and then later what became now CowSwap, the Gnosis protocol. And then you also, since these tokens potentially become worth a lot, because you need to interact with these prediction markets, and you have a lot of these tokens, and you want potentially then want to convert them back into your investment and to get the money out again, you have to hold them in a convenient and secure manner. And this is where we then basically got the Gnosis Safe at this point, where we said, okay, we need to build something for this. And this is basically original vision was that these three mechanisms are required to build a functioning prediction market ecosystem. And that's how it started with Gnosis. And at some point, prediction markets became less of a priority.
Yeah. How did that? So prediction markets were notoriously difficult I mean, still difficult, but I knew like the open team started out doing prediction markets. They moved into, options eventually. How did that kind of path go where you guys decided to double down on CowSwap and multi-sig infrastructure?
I mean, very simplified speaking, it was adoption, right? Like that basically made the decision or triggered the decision. Where it's very much where we saw, hey, prediction markets, there were multiple versions. There was Olympia and multiple smaller widgets that were integrated in different parts. But we saw that the adoption from the trading protocols, especially also from CowSwaps, and therefore also the foreseen potential outgrow prediction markets. Also with Gnosis Safe at this point, right? Like we saw that within the Gnosis Safes that existed at this point, there were a lot of assets kept that are actually not prediction market related. So this is where it then became this idea, okay, it outgrows the original Gnosis use case in both cases. Right? Again, this is where then this decision came, okay, let's enable these teams to have a more distinct focus, to also have to make decisions, also investment decisions, independent of prediction markets, because Gnosis for a long time was representing these prediction markets. And I think this also changed over time, right? Like if we think about more of the recent projects that also Gnosis pushed, which they're Gnosis Chain or Gnosis Pay, that these are detached from the prediction market use case.
Got it. Makes sense. I guess, you guys worked on those products for a long time. At some point, there was the spin out of Safe. And I know a lot of people who have joined the space more recently, I don't think they know the story behind that. So can you give us like the synopsis of how that spin out came about, what the situation was?
Yes. As mentioned a little bit before it, like we saw that, we basically have distinct focus points. And then for Gnosis, it was always like, how do we package this under one umbrella product vision of Gnosis? And this, basically then became this, okay, it becomes also a show blocker when it comes to how do we secure additional funding? How do we make sure that there are other external parties contributing? And this is basically, it got us into the thinking, okay, what is really the value proposition of Safe, independent also of Gnosis, right? Like, so what do we want to push here with? And there are many layers onto this, right? Like at the core of Safe, we have the Safe smart contracts, which are like a kind of a public good, but there's also services and interfaces building around of this. We really say, okay, how can we push this? How can we build a business model around this? How can we also get more people to invest into this? And that's really where we said, okay, to maximize on this, we want to spin out. This also allows us to take more ownership and also enables us, therefore, to make decisions more independently and push this forward. Yes. And this happened then. Actually, it took quite a time. It happened in 2000. We started this process in 2021, and then the ultimate spin out happened in 2022, but it took quite some time to get the investment, to talk to investors. 1KX is one of the lead investors, right? Like quite some coordination. Gnosis still has a big stake in the Safe ecosystem and in Safe itself, so in the project. So these dynamics obviously are not easy, and it actually became a DAO vote, right? Like, so if you want to see some of the dynamics, you can go to the Gnosis forum, and there's actually a Gnosis improvement proposal. I think it's number 29, which proposed like, let's spin out Safe, and what does it mean in detail? So this is then there were the Gnosis token holders voting on this, and it was a quite decentralized process in this case.
Got it. Was it a contentious vote, or was everyone pretty much on the same page about?
I think there were some open questions when it comes to, okay, what does it mean for alignment between Gnosis and Safe? And most of this was then also related to, okay, Gnosis has a lot of Safe tokens, like a big part of the pool belongs to Gnosis. And that's why in the end, due to this pool of tokens, it was there was not that big of a pushback on this one. Like, again, there were some voices where we were asking, like, does it make more sense? It's one of the flagship projects from Gnosis. But yeah, I think going forward, it was a good decision. And I think this is something where we could see that there was unanimity, in general, the ecosystem stood behind the decision and supported it. Let's say it this way, right? And I think that nobody regrets it to this point.
Awesome. And since that has happened, you, Lucas, others working at Safe, how would you describe your role at Safe? Are you kind of, because publicly it's co-founder, but are you kind of a CTO role, or how do you think about it?
Yes, I think this is something that we saw over the last years, that we actually changed this year. It's one of the big changes where we said we were a little bit in between of this. Are we founders that are more on a high level strategic, innovational and the future vision side, or are we more this, okay, how do we execute right now in the C-level? And in the past, we very much were more on this execution side, on the C-level side, acting, which involved also a lot of operational stuff, right? So this is where we push technology, but it was a weird mix. For us, where we actually have the biggest passion in it, where we also believe where we can have the biggest impact, is very much in this point where we say, okay, how do we move forward? How do we apply new technology? What is the direction? And it's not in the nitty-gritty details, and it's also not necessarily in how do you best organize a team of 100 people, which at some point we were close to 100 people. We then, at the beginning of the year, we had a little bit this, a low, and then now it's growing again, right? So this is where these are skills, I think, where we realized by now that we need new people, we need other people that can bring in the experience how to manage such a big team and how to align them also behind a business goal.
Got it. Okay. And how do you manage, your day-to-day responsibilities with, it seems like you're at the forefront proposing new ERCs, which we'll talk about, but how do you manage that with some of the cutting-edge research that seems important to Safe or important to your role?
The most important part that we have right now is that we do have people that we trust, that we don't have to worry about the day-to-day business. Right? I think one of the key people here that I have to mention is Rahul, who basically took on a lot of this. How do we look at Safe as a enterprise product, right? How do we push this forward? How do we also make this a business? What does it mean for us? And what does it mean for us to combine this into the self-custodial vision? Having these people really allows us to say, hey, look, we can also still work on innovation and push forward on this. And this is one part. On the other part, we also have a lot of people that we can trust on the execution side, right? Where we say, hey, we come up with initial ideas, also with this ERC, right? Where we then say we have people who pulls this through, who push this with us, where we can also act more as an amplifier more. And I think these two people you need. And for us, one of the things that we really focus on now is really how can we position ourselves that we delegate the right things to the right people where they are stronger and empower these people, and where can we then better collaborate on innovation and push high-level strategies and represent certain ideas into the ecosystem.
Got it. Okay. Makes sense. And you mentioned Rahul, you mentioned becoming more enterprise friendly. Rahul has given a talk recently about Cypher Prize as kind of like a new version, a crypto version of enterprise. And I think you guys have the $1 trillion Cypher Prize initiative. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what the goals are there?
One of the things that we saw, or that we came to realize this year, was that self-custody, we take it for granted quite often, right? And in the sense of that we are being in control, that we want that this becomes the default, that everybody wants to take control. This is what we believe in, and we assumed everybody wants this and everybody is ready for this. And I think this is something that we see this is not the case. And but it actually became, from a global situation, also more and more important that people can do this, right? I think if we look at the global situation, without going into detail, there are points where certain ecosystems close more down, they become more permissioned. And just looking at the recent news from this month, when you look also what are the plans for Google for the Android ecosystem, I'm a passionate mobile developer, and I feel I'm a little bit scared if they talk about actually we control any app being installed even outside of the Play Store, as long as it's a Google certified device, so everything that has Google Play Store. Like these are things where I'm saying, I want to have a system where you can have self-custody. And when Rahul said about the cypherpunk and enterprise values, right, like it's really where I say self-custody is one of the essentials of the cypherpunk values. It's like you need to be in control of yourself. So that's the cypherpunk part. And one of the things that we should look at is that we make it ready for enterprises, because if we don't catch enterprises and the enterprises all just go back to custodians and have their funds there, then the chances that we manage to get people that have less resources, less know-how than enterprises on board becomes even harder and even less likely, right? Like, so this is really where we say, look, we believe in the security of the smart accounts. They've been around for a while. There have been no critical no security issues. And for us, it's really that we see the layers on top where we really need to improve. And here really having these cypherpunk values cater towards enterprises is something that is required for us to reach this point. And what Lucas mentioned last year, actually, where we say, let's try to get the whole world GDP on chain. And yes, it's the $1 trillion vision, right? Like this is exactly this, where we say, if we don't get the enterprises to put their money on chain and self-custody, then this will not scale.
Yeah. Okay. Makes sense. And I guess one of the things that I noticed looking into Safe and looking into your work is you have so many trade-offs between what's good for the user, like user experience, which a lot of times centralization is the best user experience, versus the cypherpunk values, the crypto values that are so important to the space. How do you have like a mental framework at this point for how you think through where on that continuum to build products?
Yes, I have a mental model, and I think it's in general a challenge, and therefore it's not that black and white. So my mental model is more like a guideline. And this is also one of the reasons why we really said, okay, we within the teams, we also wanted to create more focus on the different parts. We have, like with Rahul and with Safe Labs, right? Like, this part where we say, look, here, we first of all ensure the self-custody at the core with the Safe Smart account. The layers on top, it's fair for now to centralize them because we first want to push for enterprises the self-custody at the core, like that you can maintain it. While with the research team, we say, actually, we would love to live in a world where it's full cypherpunk values. Everybody is full in self-control. Let's look into this. What would this look like? We maximize on these cypherpunk values, maybe overstress them in some cases. Because if we do this, hopefully, then we can pull labs in the future towards where they say more and more of the stack actually also for the enterprises can be more decentralized, more cypherpunk. Right? Like, so this is where we really say the Safe Labs, it's more, hey, look, let's provide solutions now. We want to make something that works now, convenient, accessible, where the research team looks like, hey, we want to keep this convenience and accessibility, but, get more onto decentralization, self-control, permissionlessness, no central points of failure. And I think this accessibility and convenience, these are actually 2 points that are not that often talked about, but it's how this point, right? Like how easy, like accessibility in the sense of how easy is it for you to get into a system, to use a system, to get access to a system? Because like how high are the hurdles to sign up to something, which in Web3, sometimes it's quite hard. If you think about, you have to have your private key, you have to onboard, you have to understand all of the hex data that you see. While then also the convenience to use it, right? Like where, especially in convenience, if we see like, hey, it's actually quite hard to understand what you're doing when you look at the hex code. And if it's so inconvenient, then it becomes a barrier to access, right? Because then you cannot use it anymore. And so this is really where we say, this is what Web2 is good at, right? Like if we look at all of the apps, what they do, it's just super easy to use them. They have a lot of other trade-offs and a lot of other things that don't work. But when it comes to it's easy to use and easy to install, that's what Web2 is awesome at. It's like we want, and this is why we use the tools from Web2 right now to bring this to self-custody with Safe Labs. But, we should also be able to get more into Web3 natives, more self-control. This is where the research team is going. So this accessibility and convenience play a big role for us. It's something that we always think about. How can we make it easy to use and accessible for everyone?
Got it. Do you think individuals are more open to adopting some of the cypherpunk crypto native principles, or do you think enterprises are?
It depends. It's a bit lazy answer. I think individuals become more and more aware. I think it's a little bit hard for me to speak about it and to really envision it completely, because I grew up in Germany. It's a system where you can trust your government and your banks to quite a big extent. Why I think in other parts of the world, this is already on a level where you don't want to trust them. And therefore, these cypherpunk values play a way bigger role, and this mindset plays a way bigger role where you want to go out. I think when I also talk to friends in my non-crypto bubble, basically, I see that people become more aware that also global situations get you to think a little bit more about, okay, what does it mean? Who do I want to give my data to? Who should I trust unconditionally to? And what does this value, or like, how do these cypherpunk values, how do they benefit me? And I think this is something that will become more and more important in a world where currently it's quite chaotic, right? Like it's a lot of stuff going on in all directions. And this is where I think individuals will benefit from this. On the flip side, I think that we have to still acknowledge that enterprises are interested in this, because DeFi is just a big market. And I think DeFi is still, it's a start, right? Like there's regulations, for the better or worse, regulate more how you interact with Web3. So the rules become more clear. But actually, it doesn't matter too much potentially if the rules are more restrictive or less restrictive. As soon as the rules become more clear, enterprises will find ways how to interact with crypto on a more regulated way, and it will be more interesting for them. And we also see that in some cases, by having self-custody and having these cypherpunk values for enterprises, you suddenly automatically apply to certain conditions, right? Like who owns funds, or who is responsible when it comes to custody, because you suddenly don't need a custody provider and so on. And I think there's a lot of potential. That's why for enterprises, it's interesting. It's potential in, again, DeFi, but also when it comes to regulations to allow you to cut out certain intermediaries, that makes it really interesting for enterprises. And this is, I think, one of the things that we at Safe always believed in, is really that we say we cannot live in a bubble where we say, hey, look, we exist outside or side by side with Web2. It's always very much, right, like we want to connect this traditional finance and Web2 world with Web3 and the DeFi world. And as soon as this happens, we believe that smarter accounts, such as Safe, are required to really cater towards the needs of the banks, the regulated entities that want to go into this. And I'm not sure if they think cypherpunk values first, but they will benefit from the cypherpunk values in the long run. And that's why we believe we need to make cypher price something that is a benefit and not a disadvantage where people think, oh, it's an overhead.
Yeah. It makes perfect sense, especially on the individual level. It's very easy to picture a centralized system like the German government is working well. You don't really need crypto or cypherpunk values, but then as things become more chaotic or break down, it becomes a really important kind of safety net. Speaking of, centralized systems and moving away from them, Safe Harbor is an interesting initiative that you guys have been working on for a while now. And well, maybe I would let you explain it. What is Safe Harbor and why is it important compared to, the existing Safe wallet that you guys have out there?
Yes. So Safe Harbor is a research initiative where we looked into how can we have a decentralized, permissionless queue for safe transactions. So maybe some more context here to explain it. It's that, as you introduced, right, like Safe is a multi-signature wallet. So you have to collect signatures to collaborate. As an individual, normally you collect signatures from different signing devices. As a security practice, if you're in a team, normally different people that manage a Safe need to sign and you need to collaborate. And there needs to be a place where you collect these signatures. And obviously, this is a security critical step because if you give your signature, you should make sure that you are aware what you sign and that this data cannot be changed and that it's malicious, right? Like, and that is one part. On the other side, it's also not only a security critical, but also an availability critical step where we say, if this channel where you collect signatures is offline, it's basically a denial of service because suddenly you cannot access your funds anymore because you would have to first find an alternative channel. And while at the core, the Safe Smart account is independent of this and doesn't care. You can always choose your collaboration channel yourself. It's obviously a hassle when suddenly your default channel, which for us is the safe transaction service, is not available for whatever reason. Finding an alternative channel is normally not available. And this it's not easy. And it's a big hassle. And this is where for us, this point where we say, look, let's build a decentralized solution, because in the past, actually, if you look back at the Gnosis multisig, how it worked is you submit the whole transaction data on chain, and then you confirm for each owner directly on chain confirms this transaction. And the advantage of this one is you use the blockchain as your database. That's nice. It's always available. Basically, it's not going away. As at the 10 years event, the Ethereum ecosystem said 0 minutes downtime, right? Like over the last 10 years, right? Like, so this is nice. It comes with other disadvantages. And when it comes to how do you interact with this, it's a hurdle of who pays for it. How do you, where do you get a node for it? How do you structure the storage? Because in a traditional database, it's just simpler. You have less constraints. And this research project is very much focusing on this. Okay, how can we go from this one extreme, which is everything is just in a centralized database? And now let's look at the other extreme. Let's put everything on chain again, how we had it in the past. Actually, we moved a little bit further away, but this is Harbor, this decentralized permissionless queue. And in this first version, it was the on-chain queue, right? Like, again, it's one of the extreme versions. And maybe to distinguish it to the original version from the Gnosis multisig. In the Gnosis multisig, the data was always stored within your safe or within your Gnosis multisig at that point, right? Like, so it's all, if you have your Gnosis multisig on mainnet, you had to push the data to mainnet. With Harbor, actually, we said, storing data on mainnet is still expensive. You don't want to pay just to propose a transaction and to submit signatures a couple dollars, which is already cheap at the current price. It's a couple dollars, right? So this is where we said, let's prototypes is where we say we choose any chain. Currently, it's Gnosis chain because we are familiar with it. It's cheap. It's a very constant price because it uses a stable coin as a fee token. And let's collect the signatures there on chain. And this actually works quite nice because in general, the safe does not care that the signatures are collected on the same chain. I mean, as before, it can be collected completely off-chain. So we collect it on-chain, and this obviously gives you it gives you full availability of your data. Then we started working also on some of these UX challenges, right? Like, you see, how do you interact with it? How do you lower the barrier that you require funds to interact with the chain? And this was one of the recent topics that we worked on. And another topic is privacy, right? Like, how can we introduce also like privacy towards this chain?
Yeah, got it. I'm super interested in the privacy topic, especially. But I guess in terms of, you started out with the legacy safe wallet where everything was stored on chain, like you said. Ethereum's a great database. Then that was expensive and not great UX. So the current safe wallet uses the safe transaction service, has some off-chain storage. And now you're moving back to something that's more on-chain first. Who do you think, who are the users who are going to care a lot about this, and who are going to be the main, groups that are saying we don't want to have this off-chain dependency, centralized dependency. We want, safe harbor. How do you see the different user groups breaking out there?
So the ones that use the current safe harbor or interest in it are definitely more the OG crypto people that say, hey, look, we take the extra hassle of getting potentially funds for Gnosis chain and being able to submit our transactions there. Potentially also having a little bit longer wait times right now because you have to first wait that blocks are being mined. That being said, it's on Gnosis chain quite fast, right? Like, so this is more the OG crypto people, especially also when we look at how does it integrate into like mobile apps and so on. That being said, this is one of the things where Harbor is at the current stage where we said we went very explicitly into the one extreme of everything is stored on chain inside context storage. And we believe when it comes to the costs and when And to the accessibility also, how does it integrate into mobile and other protocols that we are very much at the starting point. Like we actually will publish a post around privacy when it comes to how do we envision an encrypted queue. So we have a prototype where basically all the data that we push into Harbor is encrypted and using like shared keys between the signers of a safe and asymmetric encryption there. And as part of this one, because encryption blobs are quite a lot bigger, we then went away from storing them inside the encryption data, inside the contract data. We store them in event data. So it's a little bit cheaper, and it's not a new dynamic. It's a little bit what L2s went through, right? Like if you think about in the very beginning, L2 started pushing the data into contract storage. At some point, we had them into event storage. It's just them into data per events, and now we have blob storage. And I think also there for the queue, we really have to look what are the benefits of which storage type and what do we need here. Because ultimately, we want that it's exactly, we shouldn't ask the question that you ask, for whom is it? We should say everybody goes for this like the queue that is available, decentralized and permissionless. And this is again what I mentioned earlier, right? Like right now it's fair that labs and Safe Wallet, they concentrate on let's use our centralized service. It has, and especially with mobile, its benefits, but the research team working with Harbor, we will do our utmost to make sure that there is no drawback in using the decentralized permissionless version, and that then also the wallet team can adopt this. But at the current state, it is more for crypto natives, but we hope that we can change this within the next months.
Got it. Yeah, I've seen some of the recent progress moving in that direction. So one of the early problems, I guess, like you said, is you have to have funds on Gnosis chain in order to, store your signature there. And I saw that one of the recent initiatives, I believe it's called frictionless queues, utilizes ERC 4337 account abstraction to kind of get rid of the need for every single signer to, have a wallet where they're paying for gas or whatever it is on Gnosis chain. What can you tell us about frictionless queues and what the unlock is there?
So the idea of frictionless queues, or like of utilizing 4337 to make the access easier to Harbor, was exactly as you said, that on one side we want that you don't require any funds anymore to submit signatures. On the other side, it allows us actually that we say if we use like a network that manages how transactions get into the decentralized queue, right? Like in the sense of in this blog post, we propose we have validators. The validators basically get the signed transaction from the user, and then they can push them to Harbor. They can actually check also for certain conditions, right? Like that, for example, that's a safe, like that's a signature that is provided belongs to an owner of a safe, and that the safe actually exists. And the minimum why this is interesting is obviously because we need some spam protection. Otherwise, everybody could just send transaction for free, and this economically seen is not the most viable. But it actually allows you also to then extend on the conditions where you say, hey, on one condition is it, do you say you are allowed to break out of these conditions? How do we integrate topics like co-signers? Do they have to fulfill additional conditions? Are there things where we should not, even so it is a valid signer, should we perform as a validator additional checks not to publicize to everyone, or like to store this transaction forever on chain because it's not considered secure, which should be a first sign that it's not integrated, that this something is malicious potentially. And this is really where we say this frictionless queue, this network would enable us to include a lot of flexibility and push this forward, especially also when it comes to also in the encryption part, we see that there can play an interesting role because validating the integrity of encrypted data is not trivial. I think zero knowledge proofs can help there, but this is definitely a problem. In general, the first goal was that with frictionless queues, we saw that by introducing an on-chain queue, the accessibility and convenience dropped when interacting, right? Like compared to a centralized free service. And so since we want to commit to maintaining accessibility and convenience, we introduced this solution where we utilize 437 paymasters to get it back to a point where it feels like the same. You don't have to worry about it. You just spin up your interface, actually start your Vaku light node, which allows us to, in a decentralized manner, without any prior configuration, talk to this validator network, and then it gets pushed onto the chain.
Got it. Yeah. So you talked a little bit about privacy there. I think in a blog post I read, you kind of have like a five values that you want to accomplish, I guess, or have with a self-custody wallet. Permissionless and decentralized, which is the original safe harbor, like the first safe harbor version accomplished that. And then accessible, this is accomplished by the frictionless queues, because accessible, meaning people can more easily use the product. They don't have to have gas on a certain chain or funds on a certain chain. And then there's private and scalable. So for private, what do you see as, the approach that you might take in order to solve the privacy issue? Well, what do you see as the privacy issue? Can you just explain that quickly? And then is the solution ZK? Is it something else? How difficult is it?
Privacy issue is it's a little bit like the security issue. Nobody cares about privacy until something hits a fan and it suddenly is an issue. It's always because everybody says like I have nothing to hide. I think there's one anecdote that I like to tell was actually with the old Gnosis multisig, where Gnosis participated in the Raiden ICO at some point. And actually, because it was a Gnosis multisig with which they did this, they prepared the transaction for this a week beforehand. So theoretically, if you would have monitored the finances from Gnosis, you would have known a week before the actual ICO at what price, because it was a Dutch auction, how much Gnosis wants to invest into this ICO, which you could argue, yes, that's an extreme, gives you an extreme time frame of front running of 1 week. This thing, right? Like, so this is one part of this where I feel like, okay, privacy is just on a financial and economic incentive makes sense. On the more, I think again, on this note where you say, okay, how do we interact on a global scale? It's like pessimistically seen. I'm not sure if you know the movie Minority Report, but
Tom Cruise.
Where it's about this, right? Like some people envision what you might do and you get punished for this. And if you have a queue, it contains your intent, right? Like you actually have not executed this. You have potentially not even fully signed it. But theoretically, people can judge you in what form ever based on this data, right? Like, so this is something, again, in the Western world, normally you say, not the biggest problem, freedom of speech, everything is open, you don't get punished. Not sure if this changes, how much it changes. So privacy, I think it's something that we really want to push there, where we say people should not necessarily be able to see your intent, so your pending transaction, and should also not be able, therefore, to judge you or deny you anything because of this.
Got it.
And what do we have, like, how do we approach this? How do we see this solved? I mentioned this earlier, right? Like we started out with that we actually now start encrypting blobs, like instead of, like you see that something was signed. So because you signed a safe transaction hash, but you actually cannot foresee, like you cannot see what is the actual transaction data. This alone provides quite some privacy. We still push the encrypted data on chain, because with this, it allows the coordination, and within this trusted circle, the better coordination. It's, again, also here, it's not fundamentally new tech. It's the same tech that most of the messengers use to encrypt your group messages if you're in an encrypted channel, like a messaging group. Like we have this similar approach here. And one of the things that is noteworthy is, right, like that generally it's not good to put your encrypted data on chain, because theoretically you can argue that if it's on chain, it's forever visible. And if in 5 years somebody looks at it, then technology might allow you to decrypt it at this point. But here, since we say transaction actually are something that in most cases get executed and then become visible at the execution point, any point, it's a reasonable trade-off that we do here. Like again, also we look into this currently, it's in events. We might move it to blocks, to blobs, and then within blob space, it's even shorter availability. But I think these are the trade-offs that we are really looking into, because again, it's to the other topic, right? Like when it comes to scalability, this is a little bit the point where we say we introduce more complexity, which normally has an impact on scalability. So we have to see how do we make this trade-off that we can even it out, right? Like it's often we talk about a trilemma, but we have actually 5 criteria, and it's not only a trilemma, therefore, right? Like, so we have 5 criteria where we need to make sure that we even them out. And yeah, it's for the scalability, I think this is something where we just keep it at an acceptable level right now, which currently scalability is very much around like what is economically viable to sustain here, right? Like, so this is what we say with scalability. But I think scalability might evolve also over time when it comes to complexity, right? Like how feasible is it to run something, to provide a validator, how to really ensure security. All of this will play into security. But yeah, we are very much at the start here. And encryption, again, the prototype is actually now available on our repositories. You can look how we have this first prototype of encryption, and you can play around with this. And you can see that if you register like an encryption key, but it all also there on a UX level is quite abstracted away, so that then after this you can exchange encrypted messages, and on chain nobody can read them.
Got it. Interesting. And in terms of privacy, this is more of a broad, like philosophical question, because in a lot of different government contexts and whatnot, people have kind of touted crypto as this really transparent thing where you can see all the transactions happening. You can easily kind of, trace what's going on. And this is a way that crypto is able to kind of hunt down bad actors potentially. What do you envision? Does crypto go fully private in your opinion as we get the tech? Because it seems like it's just been a technological limitation as to why crypto hasn't been private all along. Do you think that's true? Do you think crypto goes fully private and we have to kind of do an about face with all of these governments and lobbyists where it's like, oh, sorry, actually, transparency was never a core value, never a core cypherpunk value. We're going to make sure that people can't see transactions anymore. How do you think about that?
For me, transparency was never a value personally. The value was more like this interoperability, which is the easiest achieved if you have transparency, because then it's the easiest to know how to interoperate. Right? Like, so this is, and I very much agree to what you said, is that privacy was more a technical limitation, especially if you want to have the flexibility and again, interoperability as we have some with Ethereum. And I think the tech is evolving. We get to points where with zero knowledge proofs and also with homomorphic encryption, where potentially you can actually keep data more private than before. And again, I think it's a naive assumption that I sometimes fall back into too, to say, we shouldn't be scared of our governance. Why shouldn't it be possible for the government to read all of our data? This is, again, it depends very much on your governance, and governance, even in a democratic world, can change quite fast, even if you want to or not. And this is something we should not underestimate. And I do think that potentially you need ways to expose or like to prove that you did not do anything wrong, right? Like, and I think this is where, if we look at projects like Tornado Cash, where, there are versions of Tornado Cash and also with Railgun, right? Like where you can actually prove, look, I don't have, I was not involved in this pool. I have this, I can show you that the funds that I had access to were not part of this malicious stream. I think these will be things that we have to invest more, and that, in my naive hope, and I hope it's not too naive, but I would hope that regulations acknowledge this and say, it's not that we have to see everything. We just need a way that you can prove that something, in case something malicious happens, that you were not part of it. But it might be too naive. I think sometimes regulations also become quite defensive, if you want to say it positively. And then they say, I want that you can open up everything. And I think the only thing that gives me hope is that, at least in the Western world, cryptography and like encryption is not completely prohibited. But like, I think it's not, you normally are not punished for using encryption.
Yeah. I think a world where that's the standard or normalized is a very good world to be in. I agree. One of the other big initiatives that Safe has been pushing is ERC 7955. This is a somewhat nuanced, a little bit complicated. So how would you explain 7955 to a normal person and try to, paint a picture of why it's important?
How do I explain it to a normal person? This is a very technical one. So let's try. I think first what we need to go into it, like normally contracts are created on blockchain. Right? Like you create your contracts, you deploy them. So being said, and when you deploy them, they get assigned an address, a unique identifier basically for this. And this address actually is quite important because when we are now in a multi-chain universe, it's that there's a lot of apps and users that expect that this identifier, this address, is the same on all of the chains. And blockchain has means to do so. So we are lucky. I mean, we have means to do so. And this is that use a factory, which basically deploys it. The key caveat is that also this factory for this needs to be on the same address on all the networks. And currently how we do this, one of the simple ways to also support the multitude of different chains is we have a private key. We deploy it on all of the chains. So this is the way that Safe does it. This is the way that CreateX does it, right? Like, so this is currently the way. And this is not great because it basically means if we decide we don't want to deploy on your chain, then you don't get this on your chain. And you can still deploy it yourself, but then it's not on the same address, which potentially without going into detail, can lead to people losing funds because they assumed the address was the same, but it wasn't. So this is a little bit where we say we are a central point of failure. We potentially even could make the life hard for a chain. And one of the initiatives that we see that is being done there is by that a lot of the chain providers, like a lot of the frameworks that that allow you to spin up your own chains, actually add our factory contract to their default contracts and create X similarly. So these contracts then are available from the get-go. You don't need to deploy them. So we are not a gatekeeper anymore. But we were looking for for a way where we say, hey, we don't have to depend even on the chain to do this as a pre-deploy. And 7702 gave us a tool for this. And this is where then also Nick from the research team, he was the one who actually designed this way, was saying, hey, look, looking at also another Nick in the past came up with a way how you can do it with on a normal transaction a little bit, where you generate random signatures or predefined signatures and therefore deploy it. I came up with 7955. We use 7702, where it says we can basically make this private key public, which is nice. And because normally if you make it public, you have to assume that somebody abuses this and then uses up the nonce you need for the deployment. So because the address also depends on the order of your transactions. And with 7955, we eliminated this using 7702, which is very nice because it reduces a gatekeeper, a central point of failure, which for us is one of our our biggest goals is to have less central points of failure. Why, also maybe to give it a little bit more weight, why this is relevant is that there have been cases in the past where this also not only caused loss of funds, but actually if with the deployment ways that you see, it's even possible that you deploy a different logic at the same address, right? And in an extreme case, that might mean I might own address ABC on Ethereum, but somebody else might own address ABC on Arbitrum. And if then somebody sends funds on Arbitrum, assuming it was my account, it's actually not true. So this other person can then take ownership of these funds. And this happened in the past with an airdrop, a significant one. And this is something where we saw, okay, this is definitely a central point of failure that we want to remove.
Got it. So part of it is disintermediating your team so that if something happened, you can't prevent chains from deploying on that same address on their chain.
Yep.
Deploying a multi-sig on that same address. Okay. One of the interesting topics that came up in the discussion around 7955 was certain things, what happens once we have quantum computers, and does ECDSA survive? What is your general, and you answered the question, so now I'm going to take you as an expert on the post-quantum world. What are your thoughts on what that looks like? Because it's talked about a lot, but I don't know a lot of people who are, super deep on it. What happens in a post-quantum world? What algorithms are okay? Which ones aren't?
As an expert, I'm not sure if I would call myself any form of expert in quantum security. I think quantum security is a very tricky one, right? And because if we look at the algorithms that actually are quantum secure, that these are so-called lattice-based algorithms, and these are quite tricky. They were quite different to what we have right now. And I think zero knowledge proof actually, a little bit depending on zero knowledge proofs, might be able to help out here too. So it is good that we start removing our reliance on ECDSA, or bring us in a position where it's easier to replace ECDSA, right? And this is definitely something that also is one of the goals of account abstraction, and also where we argue for it. If we say the more accounts are actually not bound to ECDSA directly, but rather allow you to also upgrade over time easily, like I say, signing mechanisms, the better it is. And generally also with the 7955, since we expose the public key, the biggest risk is that somebody figures out this public key, right? The private key. And since we expose the private key, it's not a problem, right? So in this case, you can argue it's not that we made the signing mechanism quantum secure. We just say, even if it's not quantum secure and you figure out with your quantum computer or private key, so what, right? It just doesn't matter. And obviously these are things that we have to think about, right? And as the Safe team, we position ourselves that smart accounts give you the flexibility to upgrade and to easier migrate into a quantum secure world. I think this still will require some time. And while not really directly quantum secure, seeing how passkeys actually found adoption also in the account abstraction world is a way that shows us that it's possible. Because what is nice about what is the sign about passkeys is that with passkeys, you actually use signing that is not natively supported by the Ethereum blockchain. So since you use a different curve, and even so on some chains, this curve is a precompile, but on a zero mainnet, and there also passkeys work, it's not. And the same as there's also some zero knowledge based signers that basically you do a zero knowledge proof to authenticate a safe transaction. And these are the things that show us, the flexibility in signing mechanisms allow smart accounts to be quantum, or be ready for a future where quantum computers, where we need to be quantum secure. But yeah, this is, again, I think when it comes to the nitty-gritty details on how do I design a signing algorithm that is quantum secure, that is complicated, a little bit out of scope for me. But we will definitely be one of the first to look into how to apply it towards the safe.
Got it. So if we had a post-quantum world tomorrow, what does that look like? Are a bunch of blockchains and protocols in huge trouble?
Potentially, it means that a lot of private keys or a lot of accounts suddenly become accessible for whoever has the strongest quantum computer. And I mean, I'm not sure if it's a pessimistic or optimistic view on this. It's a question, who will have this computer first, right? So, and that is a very interesting question, because this entity, whoever has this computer first, because it will not be that suddenly everybody has this computer. Right? But at some point, a computer is strong enough to break ECDSA and get you your private key, or get back to the private key. And then the question is, what is this entity doing with it? And there are this, I'm not sure how the English word is, this conspiracy, there's a conspiracy that you say, maybe somebody has it already, just doesn't tell you. Because, why would you tell anyone that you can theoretically break any current ECDSA signature algorithm by deriving the private key again, right? So this is, you would not tell. So this is the pessimistic way, where I would say, I think the immediate danger is actually that potentially certain state actors might utilize this and have access to this. And Because if it's really get to a way where everybody has access to this, then blockchain in its current form is just fundamentally broken, and we would have to replace ECDSA, and this would be a major hassle. And I think this is why it's so important that we don't wait too long. I mean, I don't think we have to hustle right now and go into panic mode. But I think we need to be ready that we can replace ECDSA.
Yeah. Okay. Makes sense. All right. So in terms of security, a lot of the discussions and conversations that I have around smart contract security, obviously Safe deploys and owns some of the most important smart contracts in the world. What can you say about the approach that you guys take to securing those smart contracts? What does it look like? Is it audits? Is it, bug bounty program? What does the stack look like?
Yes. In general, we try to have 3 to 4 layers of security here. And the first layer is that we do an audit, like during development, and that we are sure that we get external input on how did we design our contract, are there any security relevant paths that we did not consider vectors. A little bit going into parallel, and it's one of the things that we have done twice now, originally with runtime verification and currently or ongoing, because it's not a effort that stops. We did it with Tor as a formal verification. So we really say while we develop the contract, we design formal verification to validate invariance. And then once we are at the point where we say we have a release and we really want to go live, there are 2 more layers. First of all, we do actually want to have a second audit from a different auditor, so that we have 2 different auditors looking at our contracts. And we also have our bug bounty running. So this is normally we then release the contract and we apply the bug bounty. But just because we release the contracts doesn't mean, okay, now all of our products immediately upgrade to the contracts. Rather, we say we release the contracts, we have our bug bounty running, which is for the most critical issues. You can get up to $1 million of a reward. And then over time, we see that we start upgrading specific safes. Some of are also the foundation safes, so that we are the front runners, that we basically say, look, we have our safes up to date with the new version. And that normally it takes a couple of months before we say, okay, now we're at a point where we prompt the user to, don't you also want to upgrade, right? And it's really this time frame. And in some cases, we additionally also have then audit competitions. It depends a little bit on the contracts that we release, so that we can get even more incentivized to get more eyes on this. But all of this is the one that we say, hey, we really want to make sure that our smart contracts are secure, that there have been multiple eyes from multiple different entities on it.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Huge fan of audit competitions and a bunch of things you mentioned there. I guess since you've had so much experience in the security space, what's your most controversial opinion on the security space in crypto right now?
It's going to sound negative. I feel like a lot of people are overconfident in audits. And I mean, depending on who you speak in the security ecosystem, they might tell you that it's not that controversial of an opinion, actually. But I feel like sometimes it's just getting your name, it provides this, just give me your name so I can put it on my webpage that you audited my contracts, because this gives user confidence. And this is a little bit where I feel like this is not how audit works, right? You want, I like the audits where they tell me, oh, look, we looked at your contract and we have this long text describing how do we understand your contracts. And then actually I read this and tell them, oh, yes, that's how it works. Or no, actually, that's not what we intended at all, right? This is, but you still see a lot of things where it's where it's just we read through it, we found no issues, and you don't get much more in your audit report, right? And this is where I feel like I think we need a world that goes beyond just audits, but audits are definitely an integral part. I'm not saying we need to remove audits. That's not my point. When it comes to, I think another thing is a lot of people seem to bet on AI for audits. Not yet sold on that one. Again, a very powerful tool. I'm not saying that it's definitely beneficial. I'm not sure that it can replace the manual audits just yet. Maybe this changes. AI is amazingly fast evolving, so you never know. But right now, I would rather bet on manual, like on a human auditor, than on any AI.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think a lot of people are still in that camp. Speaking of AI, I guess specific to Web3 security, how do you think AI is going to change that space? Is it going to change the way that you guys approach your pre-deployment of smart contracts? What do you think the biggest impact is going to be of AI?
I think for me, it's not really this pre-deployment. I'm not sure. AI has there are multiple facets, but one of them is that AI likes to interact autonomously and automatically, and this is where safes are just great because they allow you this flexibility. But for me, a more interesting use case is, and there are a couple of prototypes on this, is when it comes to security and understanding what you're doing. Because what AI is great for me about is like, you can theoretically give AI a bunch of data and they somehow interpret this data, right? And again, it's not working perfectly, but also in crypto, right? Like theoretically, if you do interactions, you want to understand them. And we have teams like Blockade and we, Hypernative and so on, where we see like they do this for you too. And I think here it's really, when it comes to having the end user understand what you're doing, this is where AI will become a very powerful tool. And if the user understands better what they are doing, they get more confident, and potentially it makes it easier for them to flag problems. And once this happens, this allows us to reach more people. Because this is, if you're scared about using your product, you will never tell your friends to use this product. Right? And this is where I think this safety feeling, and I'm not using security as a word here because safety is more than just security. Security is one part, but it's this confidence. Right? Like I think this is where AI can help us to bring this. It will take some time. I think there are if you look at the ecosystem, Gnosis has actually also built a prototype of the AI tools that basically helps you understand safe transactions. And it's, again, very interesting because it allows you to understand some complex connections that you normally don't see. Again, currently tools such as Blockade and Hypernative, they are already very sufficient, and AI only provides a small margin just yet. But I think this will increase this margin, and that we will see this more and more.
Got it. Yeah, a lot of really interesting things there. I think, AI is already being used to look at big government bills or 600-page legal documents. It makes perfect sense that transaction data or smart contracts, AI can also be used to help regular people understand what they're doing. Well, I think we're running up on time here. In terms of the future for you, the future for Safe, what's next? What upcoming areas, what features are you most excited about?
I am very excited about to see that also how Safe Labs actually is pushing towards this enterprise-grade self-custody. I mean, I am myself a power user of Safe. I have all my crypto in Safe. I believe in this product, and I feel like having something that goes more into enterprise, I think this is something that I see, and I'm also definitely willing to invest. On the other side, I'm also very, very interested to see how do we bring forward something like Harbor towards the masses, right? Like I want that everybody can take full self-control. I want that we really get into a world where you don't have to do delegation of trust and but where you can verify yourself. But verification should be easy and not how it is today. I did a ledger transaction, a safe transaction with a ledger a couple of days ago, and it's not easy. I don't think some institutions which have technical experts that can support them, enterprises, there it works. It's a little bit like confirming that you installed the right software by comparing GPG keys and checksums. I'm not sure if I would tell my wife, please do this to verify that you installed the right app. And I want to go to a world where it has the cypherpunk values, but for my wife. And she should be able to utilize this. And I'm excited to see that with research, we finally got into a state where we can do this while still thriving and empowering our team to work on enterprise solutions.
Awesome. Well, I think that's super exciting. Cypher prize, cypherpunk for the masses. That's kind of what crypto was made to do. And it's great to hear that you're a power user of your own product. I think that's always a strong sign. Well, great. Anything else that you want to tell the audience here?
Not much. I mean, I think the only thing, it's like, while it seems chaotic, I'm very positive. I still believe strongly in the crypto values. I think there is still a big part that is not only about making money quick DeFi style, but also a lot of values in crypto about openness, collaboration, working together, sharing cool tech. And I think in these chaotic times, this is what motivates me the most about crypto. And I would still encourage everyone to look into crypto, to look at the tech of crypto and look at the ecosystem, the open ecosystem. Sorry.
Awesome. I think that's a great message. Thanks so much for joining today, Richard. Really appreciated the time.
Thank you. I was happy to be here.